Hi everyone, this is Jason Hand from VictorOps, and I've got with me today Michael Ansel from Box, and we're going to be talking about ChatOps with you, with a specific little twist about securing ChatOps. And so we've got probably about 30 minutes of material that we're going to step through. I'm going to be giving you some real-life examples of some things that you could be doing within your organization via a ChatOps approach. And we'll talk about some benefits and some just general topics within ChatOps. And then I'm going to hand it off to Michael, and he's going to talk a little bit more about, like I said, the secure side of ChatOps, because as you can imagine, there are probably some things that you can do from your chat client that maybe not everyone should have the ability to. And so that's definitely something that teams need to think about and find different ways to address. And so we're going to try to cover those topics as best as we can. With that said, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, feel free to use the questions button. You should see a button or some sort of tab in your screen that can give you the option to go in and ask a question. So at any time that you have a question, go ahead and add that in there. And then towards the end of the presentation, Michael and I will go through those questions and we'll do our best to answer them. Also, I do encourage you to interact with us on Twitter. Both of us are pretty active on Twitter. We love talking about not only ChatOps, but things related to our IT industry and stuff that's more or less relevant to the DevOps movement. We're also happy to talk to you about things related to VictorOps and Box. So if you're on Twitter, reach out to us. I'm at Jason Hand, and Michael is at Michael Ansel. So I'm going to move forward here, and let's just get started. So the term ChatOps has actually been around for quite some time. Since around late 2012, the company GitHub has been engaging in activities that they began calling ChatOps. And in fact, there's one specific person within GitHub named Jesse Newland who, if you do any kind of searches on ChatOps, specifically within YouTube, you'll eventually come across several presentations that Jesse has been giving for a number of years. So the term ChatOps has actually been around for quite some time, but here in recent months or so, I'd say within the last 6 months, it seems like the adoption of ChatOps has really taken off, especially within the DevOps movement and our specific little part of the industry who are searching for new ways to be collaborative and have just more efficient ways of getting things done. And Jesse has a really great quote that he uses a lot of times to just sort of have a basic explanation of what ChatOps is, and he just simply puts it as placing tools directly in the middle of the conversation. And so what does that mean exactly? So on a day-to-day basis, most of us are using a number of different tools. Of course, we've got our favorite chat clients. Maybe that's HipChat, Slack, or Flowdoc, or maybe Campfire, or maybe you're using something still like IRC internally. But point is, a lot of us are starting now to just adopt this idea that if we move our conversations into a chat client, we can have this greater situational awareness and tribal knowledge of what's going on not only within our business units and our specific teams, but across an entire organization. And being able to share that information with others on your team has so many benefits and things that we're going to talk here a little bit more in a minute. But you start to see some real amazing progress with what you're ultimately trying to do, which is just deliver software much quicker and get feedback from your customers and your users much quicker, and just sort of keep things moving at a very fast pace. And so there's all these different tools that teams use, both VictorOps and Box, I'm sure, as well as a lot of other people in our industry are using things like Jenkins and GitHub and Chef and Puppet and Salesforce and Docker. And these are all, different tools and services that we use on a day-to-day basis. So like Jesse had mentioned, we're now starting to move these tools into our chat conversation where we can engage with these services. We can actually trigger things to take place. But we can not only do that, but we can pull in information or have that information automatically provided to us without us necessarily having to take extensive steps to go retrieve that information. And so that started to really speed things up. And then on top of that, we've got these bots. Hubot is probably one of the more popular ones just because it's been around the longest. It was originally developed by GitHub and then later open sourced and made available. Lida is very popular amongst Ruby developers. And then there's the other one I've got mentioned down there, which is pronounced R2, but it's spelled ERR, and that's a Python bot. And so those are the current kind of three big bots that are being used in conjunction with chat, and then also these third-party services via API or maybe integrations right into the chat client to make just a lot of really creative things happen in a much more efficient way. But a lot of this actually started with us just wanting to move the command line into chat. And honestly, that's not only where it started, but that's still where a lot of teams find the most value, is being able to run commands straight from a chat client as though they were sitting in their terminal. Many of us in the operations world, in the development space, we're very comfortable spending most of our day within our terminal, within our command line interface, and just making things happen. It's just the way we've done things for years, and it becomes sort of a very natural thing to do. So now we're moving into this space where we can make our chat clients behave very much like a chat client. So we can do all of the same things that we're used to doing from a command line, but then there's all these byproducts and side benefits that start occurring by us actually taking those actions from within chat. So we're now starting to move into an era where we've got these bots and we've got these chat clients and these automated services that are willing and able to do things for us without arguing about it, without putting up any static. And so what you have is that a lot of people are starting to rely on these bots, and they're starting to see them as friends and colleagues and teammates that can actually do some of the heavy lifting for us and allow us to then go out and work on other things. And so why would we start moving to this ChatOps approach? Why would we let these bots start to handle these things for us? Well, first and foremost, it's very, very much part of the DevOps movement to begin sharing as much as possible. I mentioned earlier creating this situational awareness, having this tribal knowledge, and just more people within your team knowing what's taking place and knowing what's going on and knowing how to get things done. So sharing as much as possible is a very important aspect of DevOps, and taking a ChatOps approach allows for that to happen a lot easier. The next thing that sort of I identify as a benefit of ChatOps is speed. Now, of course, many of us, like I mentioned, we're very comfortable spending time within our command line interface, making things happen from there, but being able to move it over into a chat client and take action straight from within chat can actually be considerably quicker depending on the action you're performing. One anecdote that I like to use is that I oftentimes need to go into Salesforce and look up some sort of information about a customer, or just relevant information to something I'm working on or researching, and all of that information is stored within Salesforce. Now, it's not too terribly difficult or cumbersome for me to log into Salesforce and begin looking for that information, but if I can somehow request that information via chat, and whether or not it's a chatbot that goes out and gets it, or it's some sort of native integration into my chat through Salesforce API, that information is presented to me much quicker from the chat client and in fewer steps. So there's this level of speed that can really start being added to what's going on. And then learning is the next thing. So another good example, or another good story I like to share is actually from GitHub, in the fact that they do a lot of their onboarding straight within chat. So if you're new to GitHub, they'll ask you to just start spending time within their chat client, within their company's chat client, and just sort of paying attention to how things get done. And so if you're a developer, of course you're going to want to know, how do you push code out to GitHub? How do you do some different things like building different platforms, and your testing and your staging and all that kind of stuff. And you'll very quickly pick up on how things get done within your team or within your organization simply by hanging out within chat. A few more benefits. Let's just start with security, since that's one of the reasons why we're having this webinar today. You can add this extra layer of security to everything that takes place within your organization simply by moving it into chat. Now, if I was to take action from my command line, it's likely that occasionally I'm going to fat finger something, I'm going to have a typo in the command, and maybe it didn't actually do anything bad, but oftentimes it can. So by moving that type of action or that activity into chat, you can actually put in another layer of security so that only specific things can be run, or only specific requests can be made. And if you happen to make a typo or fat finger something, the bot will just say, I don't understand what you're asking me to do, can you please try again? And you don't always have that layer of security when you're doing things from a terminal. Brainstorming is another side benefit. I was just talking to a colleague earlier today about how much easier it is to bounce off ideas with other members of my team, all from within chat. Especially for someone like myself. I identify myself as an introvert, and if I get into a room full of 20 people and everybody's talking and everybody's throwing out ideas, I oftentimes just shut down and try to stay quiet and just listen. But if you move all that into chat, it actually becomes easier for me to open up and start throwing out my ideas. I don't feel like I'm not being heard because I actually just have this one room where I can share my thoughts. And then last, moving to a ChatOps approach is because it's a new interface to get things done, and it's quicker, and you're sharing, and there's all these side benefits. It's actually really fun. There are some fun things you can do with some different scripts. We can pull in, pictures, funny pictures, but that's not really what I mean by it being fun. Although that is a good argument. What I really mean is that this is a new way to get things done, and it's quick, and it's adding all these new features, and to me that just adds a layer of fun to my day-to-day job. So now you're starting to think, all right, I see the benefits. I'm understanding a little bit more about ChatOps. But I know, it's not necessarily something that I can just dive right into. I'm going to have to get some adoption. I'm going to have to see, how does this work within my specific context? I'm in sales, or I'm in marketing, or I'm in support. What are some things that I can be doing from within ChatOps? So I'm going to move on to some real-world examples of some things that some of them are things that we do here within VictorOps. Some of them are things that I've heard others are doing. And some are just some things that I hope to implement down the road within some of my teams because they've requested these, and I look forward to being able to provide this type of functionality all within chat for them. So this first example, this is more geared towards our developers. This is something we currently do within VictorOps, and what I would do as a developer is just go into my chat client, and I ask my bot, which our bot is named FooBot, and so I ask my bot to just go out and do a new build within Jenkins for me. And so I run a command essentially from within chat, and then my bot actually responds back and tells me that it's taking that action for me. And then in this specific example, I've got Jenkins, which is a separate service. I've got that integrated into my chat, so it comes back in and echoes back to me, plus everyone else in the chat room, what is taking place. So you can see that this particular install of the platform is taking place, and it was started by me at 11:03. And then it also echoes back when that's been completed. So this is something that I could have done from within Jenkins, and then hopped back into chat and said, hey everyone, I just started a new build, and I will update you once it's complete. But those are actions that I no longer have to do separately. I can just take that action from within chat, and then everything will just automatically echo back into chat, and everyone's on the same page in terms of what took place, exactly how it was done, and when this particular platform is actually installed and ready to go. So that's one example for the developers. If we move on to something like pushing code, again, let's say I'm a developer and I just went out and fixed a bug on some specific little piece of software. I'm now ready to commit that bug, and then after that's done, I'll actually push that code. Commit the code and then push the code. So again, traditionally, I would have done all this from my command line and then came into chat and communicated with my team what I did. So I would tell them that I committed the code changes. I would maybe then wait a few minutes and then echo or then run my command that says I'm going to push the code now, and then come back in and again communicate to my team what took place. By doing it this way, within chat, all I'm going to do is just that one initial step of committing the code. And then between my chat client and my bot, it's going to actually it's going to tell everybody on my team what took place. And the same with pushing that code. So this is a good example of just using something like GitHub. You're going to do your normal thing, but there's all these extra benefits that take place without you having to lift a finger. Let's move over into the ops side. I get a lot of questions from people about how does ChatOps, what does ChatOps have to do with VictorOps? Well, we think that ChatOps is perfect for incident management. In fact, we have chat built into VictorOps for that very reason, because when you're someone who's responsible for being on call and taking care of your infrastructure and making sure that your service is up and it's reliable, you're going to want something, a place where you have this one single source of truth, where you know everything is taking place, where you can actually take action to resolve stuff, collaborate with your team. And so chat and the idea of ChatOps falls into line with what VictorOps is all about very perfectly. And so here's a good example of that. We've got VictorOps kind of linked up with our chat client here, and so VictorOps is telling the group that there is a new incident that's just come in, and it's critical. And it's also telling me that it's trying to notify someone on my team via push and SMS. So that particular member, Irish Warhammer, his name's Tom here in our team, he then acknowledges through our bot that he's going to take a look at that particular incident. And then VictorOps comes back and says, all right, I see that Tom has now acknowledged. And then I'm already sort of in this chat client or in this conversation just sort of paying attention anyway. And I'm curious about this because I'm a stakeholder in this type of problem for whatever reason. So I asked my bot to go out and grab a graph for me. Now I could have went over into my CollectD service or whatever, maybe I have a dashboard that's showing me all these things, and I could have seen the same thing there and then maybe taken a screenshot and then copied it into chat so that others can see it, or somehow just in a very verbose way explain to my team what I'm seeing. But by me asking my bot to go out and bring in that graph and add that context right to the conversation along with the acknowledgement, along with the incident and what's going on, that adds so much extra valuable information to what is taking place in that particular moment. And so that's sort of a good example of how we use it, and a lot of teams use it actually, for incident management. If we move over into our support team, we love here at VictorOps to extend trials for anybody who wants to give VictorOps a shot. And so we oftentimes find ourselves extending those trials. You get 14 days for free, and if that's not enough time, we'll put some more time on the clock so that you can come in and kick the tires around just a little bit longer. And so now we can do all this from chat. And used to there would be one specific gatekeeper and the only person who was allowed to do this because it was a very specific command that they had to run from their terminal. And there is a risk that they might do something damaging to the database or maybe screw somebody else's account up if they didn't type it in exactly like it's supposed to be. But by moving it into chat, we've actually added this layer of security where you really can't screw it up. If you were to type in the name of the company that you want to extend their trial for, and you type it in wrong, it's just not going to know what to do. But now, because we've added it into chat as a solution that you can take action on within chat, you've added this security. I can do things much quicker. There's other people on my team that can do it if I'm not available. And so it just becomes so much easier and simpler. And now I'm also, by taking that action that I extended the trial for Acme Ops, I've communicated to my team that their trial has been extended as well, and I didn't even have to go in and type in a separate message to communicate that. The next example is just me wanting to see when was the last time we had a support ticket from a specific customer, and so when I ask that, my bot will then go out and it will search through the records within Salesforce and then retrieve that information for me. Again, I could have looked all this up within Salesforce, but the ability and the power to do it from within ChatOps is really awesome. Another example for support, let's say someone has a support request where it's really just a feature request. And so I'll go ahead and run a command saying, hey, I've got a new feature request that I need to add. And so the bot will come back and ask for just a few more bits of information, and I'll provide that to them. And then we'll get a notification back from our ticketing system saying, hey, a new feature request has been added. This is a very simple thing that we use all the time. It's a great way for us to just sort of keep tabs on feature requests, what people are asking for, and then we can introduce those into our roadmap moving forward. Let's talk about sales and marketing for change. These guys are a little bit more on the non-technical side, of course, from our team, but that doesn't mean that there aren't some really cool things that they can be doing from within ChatOps. For example, I'm giving this webinar right now with Michael, And I do webinars at least once a month, and sometimes I want to know how many people do we have signed up. Is this going to be, 100 people, 300 people, less than that? What's going on here? And so I can real easily just go into my webinar software if I'd like. I can log in and check some things out, or I can just ask my bot to tell me what's going on, just as though it's another member of my team. And so I run a command that asks what's the head count for the next BrightTalk webinar that we have, and it comes back and tells me that we have currently 135 registered guests. Again, that's something that maybe I could have done in a different way, but now I've done it through chat and I've communicated to my team the information that maybe they didn't find it relevant at the time, but they think it's interesting now. But they've also learned by my action how to go and retrieve this information on their own later. Maybe I want to take it one step further. Now that I know, I've got 135 registered guests, that's a pretty good count. Maybe I want to go ahead and do another quick promotional push, and I want all that to go out on Twitter and Facebook and wherever else. I can just let my bot take care of that for me as well. Some more sales and marketing type of examples. Probably like most of you out there, your marketing team is going to pay close attention to what their lead count is for any particular quarter. And even further, maybe they want to know what specific marketing campaigns are working so that you can maybe allocate some more resources or some more time to a specific campaign that's doing really well, or maybe you find that one's not doing well and you need to actually put some more resources to that. Either way, all of this information is stored in some sort of external service, but why not bring that into chat so that you can share that with others and find that information right within the conversations that you're already having. Here's another example of sales and marketing. I do a lot of blogging. I keep track of all of that within our service that we use, which is Trello. And so here's an example of me just asking in general within chat, hey, does anybody know when my next blog is due? And of course our VP of marketing gets a little snarky and says, hey, you should try asking the bot. And I remember, oh yeah, there is a command that I can go and check out what's going on within Trello. And so I run a command that'll go and query my information within Trello. And then it comes back and tells me that my blog is due on 5/30, which was actually quite a while ago, so I'm kind of late on that particular blog. How about we move over into a business unit that you would worry, I don't know if this is really a safe place for us to be sharing this type of information, and that would be finance. And you can definitely make the argument that finance does not need to, nor should it, share all of its information within chat. But with that said, there are some things that are relevant to the rest of the team. Or maybe you're just trying to share some information with other business units within your company. So maybe towards the end of the quarter, you want to know, if you're someone in finance, how many paid users do we have right now? Because I'm about to give a presentation to our board, I'm about to give a presentation internally, whatever the case is, I can go into my service and find out how many paid users we have for that particular company. But if I do it within chat, it's going to be much quicker. This isn't sensitive information that I'm worried about others on the team knowing, so why not do it within chat? The same for things like late invoices. I can run a command of, how many companies do we have that are 30 days late on their invoices? And again, my bot will go out and retrieve that information for me. So very simple information that's not necessarily sensitive. This is mostly just to illustrate some things that you can be doing within other departments that aren't necessarily technical. And so the point of all of this is that although ChatOps is super powerful, it isn't something that's specific to just your developers or just your operations teams or more or less just your technical team. It's actually something that can be utilized and used across all business units and teams within an organization. However, as we're going to talk about moving on, maybe you don't want every single person in your organization to have the same ability to run the same commands. For example, maybe you don't want someone at your front desk necessarily being able to go out and push new code. And so with that in mind, I'm actually going to hand it off to Michael Ansel of Box, and he's going to step through some of his thoughts on the securing side of ChatOps. Michael?
Thanks a lot, Jason. So yeah, as Jason said, ChatOps is for everyone, but not every command is for everyone. ChatOps has a lot of power in that it lets you manage and collaborate on information in your area of responsibility. You can have a DevOps team manage their production environment. You can have a finance team manage billing. You can have a sales team manage leads and contracts. But for the most part, you don't want your employees managing information outside of their area of responsibility. You probably don't want your DevOps team extending trials or modifying customer contracts. And you probably don't want your finance team changing things in your production environment. So while ChatOps provides a huge amount of value without access control, many organizations are going to require some form of separation between different teams. Some of those different commands that you might see that are a little bit more concerning are things like reprovisioning servers, adding new network access control list entries in production. Maybe extending trials might be considered a little more tame, but downgrading or upgrading an account for a customer can be extremely damaging. Deploying new code into production, executing database migrations, all of these different kinds of actions are things that would be really nice to be able to do collaboratively through chat, but if they're done by the wrong people, could be dangerous. So the overall idea whenever you're looking at ChatOps is think about how you're going to secure this, and overall, who do you trust? And there's a couple of different ways this needs to get broken down. First, who do you trust with your individual chat conversations? And this boils down to what chat service you're using. Do you trust a cloud provider with the information that you would like to put in chat? So do you trust them with information about your customers? Or do you need a corporate or on-premises version of chat? The next question is, who do you trust with authenticated access to your production environment? Wherever your bot is running, you're giving it access to control production, to control these sensitive things. So do you trust a cloud provider with access to controlling your production environment? Or do you require that to be in a corporate network? Or do you require that the bot only live with it behind a production firewall? Any of these are totally valid, just depends on what your security model is. And then finally, who do you trust to perform each individual command? And that's what I'm going to dig into more in just a minute. But it comes down to what are your organization's access rules? Do you trust every employee with the same kind of access, which may be very true for smaller organizations? Do you whitelist specific users and say, no one gets access except for these specific groups or teams of people? Do you want a blacklist and say, everybody gets access, but maybe we don't allow external contractors to control things? Or do you want a full role-based access control system that gives you the flexibility to say, this team controls this area, this other team controls this other area, and really build specifically what you need? As you're looking at this, there's three key things to look at when you're working with securing your ChatOps deployment. The first step is define the attack vectors you're trying to protect against. Are you trying to protect against the chat server being compromised, or just individual user accounts having their passwords stolen or being cracked? Are you concerned with the bot itself being compromised, or is that considered out of scope? These are things that you just need to sit down with your security team and walk through what are your major concerns as an organization. The second thing is have a flexible tiered off model so that you can meet whatever those different needs are. Some commands are going to have very high authentication requirements. Doing a database migration, you want to make absolutely sure you know who is executing it and that they're the right person, that nothing has been compromised in between. But looking up when maybe a next blog entry is due, you probably don't need a huge amount of security around that. So you want a flexible system that's going to allow you to do kind of meet whatever needs you have. And then finally, don't give the bot God access. You're putting a lot of security logic into your bot, but don't let that be the only way that security happens in your system. Have a defense in depth strategy. If the bot is compromised, the attacker shouldn't gain any kind of extra privileges beyond what a normally authenticated user would get if they were doing this through the bot, because you have downstream enforcement. So make sure that if you're talking to Jenkins, that Jenkins is also enforcing some kind of access control and doesn't give you access to every job that Jenkins could run. Instead, it says only these jobs are accessible via chat. Or if you want to deploy code, that you have a downstream system that ensures that you only deploy properly tested code and not just some arbitrary blob of code sent from the internet. A couple of examples of how we've solved these problems at Box. The first is adding two-factor authentication. So if you go into chat and you have a command that you want to ensure you know that the user's account has not been compromised. You're not protecting against the chat server or the bot being compromised, but you're protecting against a password being stolen by just adding that extra two-factor step. Whenever you go into chat, you propose that I want to do some command, and the bot comes back and says, hold on, you need to two-factor authenticate. At that point, you can authenticate directly with the bot. The bot can go through an external two-factor provider and send a push notification to your phone. You can acknowledge that, prove that you are who you say you are, and at that point, you're now authenticated with the bot. The bot knows that your account hasn't been compromised, and then you can perform whatever command you want. A more detailed example is with approvals. So say I want to rebuild one of our servers with a new type of image on it. I want to take one of our backend servers and reprovision it as a web server. So I go into chat and I put in the asset tag and what the new server role will be. Whenever I try to reprovision it, the bot comes back and says, hold on, that server has a role that's owned by some other team. Before I can do this work, I need to get it approved by someone who is responsible for the system in its current state. At that point, anyone on that other team can hop into chat, just approve my command really quickly, and everything continues as it was. But we've added that extra layer of making sure that I didn't type in the wrong asset tag, that server is in fact ready to be reprovisioned, and it gives you that secondary approval that exists in most systems. And then finally, if you have very strict access requirements, you can really customize on the client side and authenticate through the entire pipeline. So at Box, we have very strict security requirements. We have a lot of sensitive data. So we added a full pipeline system so that we sign on the client side, and it guarantees that nothing up until the bot could have been compromised. So if I access this and try to run a database migration from my phone, the bot comes back and says, hold on, you're not using a secure chat client that signs all of its messages. Instead, I need to switch and go to my laptop, which has a secure client on it, and authenticate the message all the way through the pipeline.
Yeah. Hey, Michael, I just want to cut in real quick here. I know we're getting close to the end here, but before we get cut off, in case our webinar software drops us off here, we will put these slides online, and I'll share those out via Twitter, and we'll also have a recording of this that we'll put up. So with that, go ahead and jump back into what you were going to conclude with, and we'll wrap things up.
Sure. So yeah, my final word on this is ChatOps doesn't necessarily require access control. There's a considerable amount of value that you can get without caring about security at all. All of the things that Jason mentioned are extremely valuable and don't require extensive security. The important thing is that as an organization, you know which actions are safe to use without access control and which ones should be delayed until you have some kind of security plan in place. And that's all I have.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Michael. We have pretty much out of time, so thanks again for everyone who has joined. We will share these slides and the recording as soon as it's available. Follow us on Twitter, Jason Hand and Michael Ansel, and thanks again for joining us. Bye.